Yeah,
All
I
right.
was using the sarcastic voice. So,
And we are live, everyone. Welcome to the After Show. My name is Nick Soutter. I am here with Ethan and Uncivil Law. Thank you guys for
Hello.
joining us. And they've already been going at it. Um,
Well,
It'll be
and
a
you
fast
listen
show.
here.
so I felt bad. I actually had to interrupt. They were having a very good discussion. It's like, okay, we're going live. So we're doing it live. So I'm going to put the link. Actually, I think I didn't get a chance. I was actually listening to them, so I didn't get a chance. So let me put the link. We actually have you don't see Uncivil Law because he's not talking. Whoever talks, this is going to be you need to say something. Prove you're here.
I feel unloved. I feel unloved every time I'm not on screen. I'm just going to talk continuously from here on out so that I will be the center of attention because I am the most important.
Obviously, he shares a lot in common with the two hosts of the show.
Mm, mm.
All right, so we're here, and what were you guys talking about right before we were so you were reading something about officers that were about to or had well we also talked about. I thought that was interesting because we covered
Yeah,
that.
some Florida police organization apparently offered to hire cops who are fired or resigned over police misconduct. I'm like, well, that's just super promising news. From Brevard County. Ooh, like they've never had problems before in Brevard County,
Oh my
Florida.
God.
Hey, Buffalo 57, and this is apparently from their Twitter. Hey, Buffalo 57 and Atlanta 6, we are hiring in Florida. Lower taxes, no spineless leadership, or dumb mayors rambling on a
Jesus.
police conference. Plus, we got your back. Hashtag Law and Order Florida. Hashtag move to where you are. Great. That's real super promising. I feel further from Brevard County via their Twitter. Minneapolis officers, we will not disband our law enforcement agencies or give in. Great. That's super duper promising. I am encouraged. Wonderful.
Yeah. So,
In Brevard County,
sorry, I'm
because
putting this
they've never
link up
had
on.
issues in Brevard County.
I'm putting this link up on Discord, so I'm a little distracted. Okay, there we go. Yeah, and I guess we can talk a little bit more about this now. So it's the problem with institutionalized racism.
Uh-huh.
And the issue is that there are people who believe that there is a certain worldview, that there's a certain world status that is correct, and that it is correct for it to continue at any and all cost. And if someone has been fired or resigned because they weren't a good cop, don't offer to hire them again. It you know I try to listen when people say, well, it's just a few bad apples. I tried to listen for a long time. I tried to listen. But when you keep putting the bad apples back in with the other apples, then they're going to spoil the rest of the bunch, right?
Right.
Um, and, we have a problem with police in this country. We have a problem with militarized police in this country. We have a
Yes.
problem that police are doing the work that mental health care professionals should be doing.
Yes, we do rely on the police to do way too many things. That I agree with that. For
And
sure.
that's what defund the police means. It means we have to decommodify the police. We have to end the war on drugs. We have to take the money that we're giving to cops so they can buy drones and tanks and instead build mental health facilities so that when people are
Right.
self-medicating with drugs, they don't go to prison. Their rest of their lives aren't ruined. They get the help that they need and they rejoin society and they're productive members of society again. Also, end all private prisons because it is an absolute sin that anyone makes money off of someone else going to jail.
Right. I think we made a massive mistake in our culture by getting rid of the asylums. I think that there is a legitimate need for mental health. And a lot of people who are homeless, for example, have mental health issues, among other things. I think we need to do way more in treating this than we do. And it was a massive mistake. Private prisons, I don't have a particularly strong viewpoint on it. I think that they need to be held to the same standards as public prisons. If there's a way for them to do it in a more economical way, then that's fine. My one reservation, though, is that they then they might have an incentive to make more things illegal, so there'd be more people in prison. So they have a financial incentive for things being criminal. So that is my
Well,
one big reservation on that.
and let's be honest, it was there were a lot of calls from the Democrats in the 80s and the 90s to do things like the three strikes laws and to
Sure.
pile on charges and to make lesser charges more serious and affect you more than they used to. Um, and as much as people, don't want to hear it, it was people like Joe Biden who had this narrative that in order to get the middle and to get the blue dog Democrats to vote for us, we have to show that we're tough on crime. We're tough on crime. And those decisions hurt the poor communities in this country, which are disproportionately African American and other minorities, more than anyone else, because it's just a thing. The poorer you are, the more likely you are to commit crimes, because a lot of times you aren't making enough money at your normal job, so you turn to something outside of the law to make up the difference. We have
Yeah.
to raise the bottom rung of our society. Poorer people need more. We need to stop things like saying we need to replace social programs with UBIs, because people that are on social programs need those social programs in order to be successful. They don't need them because they're lazy.
There are a lot of problems with the current social programs we have. There's all these fiscal cliffs that exist because you have different programs coming in at different rates, and so you can have a situation where you have gaps where a person is disincentivized from earning more to certain limits, because if they fall within a particular range, they actually wind up at a net loss. So you can have some problems where there's situations because you have so many programs running independently by so many agencies. But back to the institutionalized racism thing, at least as it respects to the police, for me, I don't think I don't see it as institutionalized racism. I do see institutionalized protection of police. I see with police unions and qualified immunity a lot of deference that I feel is improper in a lot of places. I don't think it's because racism, though, in my view, but I think there are institutionalized problems. And to the extent that the police are coming more in contact with African Americans, then even assuming the police are equally abusive on average, if it's just to make up a number, if 1 out of every 500 times the police act in an improper way, if they come into contact with African Americans more often, then just by rolling that dice more often, you'd expect there to be more that would be experienced, even if it's not based on racism, just from the extra experience.
Sure.
But I also think, like, when we look at the crime bill and stuff like that I do believe in like Pareto distributions and the 80-20 rule. I certainly believe that a lot of crime is caused by a few individuals, and the most and if we can figure out ways to get those people off the street, that would be good. I think that's what three strikes and you're out was designed to do. To the extent it worked, I can't say, but I
It
mean,
didn't.
violent crime. I mean, since the 80s, violent crime went down like by half.
Well,
So
and
there
I
was
can prove
that.
it didn't work, because if you remember, I think it was just last year, the New York cops were like, "Oh, we're not going to do it. You guys are being mean to us, so we're not going to
Yeah, I
make as
saw that
many
on John
arrests."
Oliver.
Yeah, and what happened? Nothing. There was no like giant crime spree. There was no, people weren't dead in the gutters in the streets because the cops weren't arresting people. There were just fewer people arrested. That's it. That's the only
Yeah.
thing that happened. Excuse me. Before we get into this, can you explain, because you'll be able to do it far better than I will, can you explain civil forfeiture and
Sure,
how that
something
works?
else I oppose. I don't like civil asset forfeiture at all. But basically, it is where the crime or where the lawsuit is against the money instead of the person. And so you will see cases like United States of America versus $8,850, or United States of America versus a Ford pickup truck, and cases like that. So we are suing the money, we're suing the thing, and we have to prove to preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, that it is affiliated with bad stuff. And as a consequence of that, the police just wind up seizing massive amounts of money and stuff. It is not exactly unusual for the police to seize a vehicle and then magically it's suddenly being driven by the chief law enforcement officer. What an amazing coincidence. So yeah, the civil asset forfeiture thing is complete crap. Basically, they just have to have preponderance of the evidence that it's affiliated with a crime. So a person is arrested, they have money on them. It's like, prove that this money is not from a crime. Good luck with that plan. So yeah, it's a total crap.
Yeah. So, and just as an example, for instance, you're driving down the street, and a cop pulls you over for whatever. Your blinker is out, and the cop says the cop sees on your dashboard an envelope full of cash. Okay, you're taking an envelope full of cash to somebody to buy a car from them or something, and the cop seizes the money and says, "Well, I don't know that I believe that this money was going to be used in a crime, therefore I'm going to seize it."
Right.
That's it.
You understand it perfectly. You're there.
Well, thank you. Do you know what hi, Christopher? Do you know what the genesis of that was by chance? I don't. That's why I'm asking.
Well, there was the big Supreme Court case on point, which I never remember the name of because, of course, it doesn't have a memorable name. But it was literally called something like United States of America versus like $8,850, which was the genesis of that. Where they basically they did that case where it's just like, well, if they can prove that this is an instrumentality of crime, they can seize it. Now, I have no problem with criminal forfeiture. Criminal forfeiture is fine.
Of course,
it comes after due process and conviction and all that great stuff.
Sure.
So you're a drug lord, will seize your house, your car, all that great stuff, and donate it to the poor or whatever. But yeah, we found you just with $5,000 on you. Why do you have $5,000 on you? Reasons? We're gonna take it and prove it's not a crime. Good luck. Yeah. And it wouldn't you believe it? But there's some speculation. But bear me out, as hard as this is to believe. But it seems that some police officers and some police departments are using it as a funding resource, and they're just using the mechanism to get cash. And it's almost like they were highway robbermen of old, standing by the highway and robbing anyone who comes down the street. I know that couldn't possibly be true, but that does seem to be a problem.
All right,
Mr. Mowdy, how are you, sir?
Yes.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
There you are. We hear you. We hear you fine.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. I'm doing quite well. I just had a conversation on a different topic, on the same topic, on a different show. So like I feel like I'm primed. I feel like I'm primed and ready to go, baby.
There you go.
Put me in, coach.
Well, you're here. Give us your feelings on the protests and the lockdowns and all that.
So the first thing I want to say is, I'm not being a non-activist, right? I'm not an activist for anything other than awesome dialogue, right? And for that, I will happily be an activist, if there is such a thing for activists for good dialogue. That being said, the public opinions I'm willing to share are, obviously, what happened was ridiculous. Obviously, the police force is an imperfect system that needs to be changed. How it is changed, whether through incremental attempts or a complete destruction for the purpose of reconstruction, that is to be determined. I don't have enough information about that to have an informed opinion about which strategy to go with, although I can see the value in each approach. What else? The fact that this is all happening within the context of COVID is certainly a variable that I'm playing with, just because from the group dynamic perspective, people being kept in for long periods of time usually have more pent-up anxiety, energy, arousal, etc. And that is the powder keg situation in which this is happening, never mind the autocratic political leadership. What else? And there's one other point that I wanted to make a public opinion about. And I think that one of the solutions, now that I've presented my opinion on some of the problems, a step forward. Now I'm going to obviously wear my bias on my sleeve. I study psychology. I'm going to be looking at things through the filter of psychology, and I think that the solutions that are going to help us move forward are going to be the ones based on science, specifically psychology, specifically unconscious bias, and the research that has been done in attempts to wane or mediate that unconscious bias. I think through that research, efforts to move forward with change in social policy are going to be the most productive. And that's it. That's my take on these things. Now, I know that that's not exactly the topic you guys were discussing.
No. That's good. I mean, it's tangential,
Well, and it's a hangout. We're gonna
Right.
we're gonna fly around on the topics, and I think that was definitely worth talking about. So I appreciate that
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And then we also. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add one last note that now that I've given my public opinion about topics, allow me to make it just a little bit more personal. I'm anxious. Am I allowed to curse on here?
Fuck yeah.
Okay, I'm anxious as fuck.
Yeah.
Like this past week, the events on Monday were a turning point for me in the way that I viewed this whole experience. And I'm sure that we can have a whole conversation about that. The double screen of Trump literally saying that he is the friend of peaceful protesters while literally at the same time fucking pepper balling and flash banging the peaceful protesters that were in front of the White House so we can have a photo op. As far as I'm concerned, that is going to go down in the history books right next to Hitler, Mao, Lenin, Stalin, every prototypical example of propaganda.
Sure.
That's where it's going to be. And so for me, that was a very change. So I'm anxious. Some would say that my anxiety is the goal, right? Me, middle-aged white dude being anxious is just a taste of what people of color are trying to say they live with every day in the protocol that they follow to live in the same country that I do, and I don't have to follow that protocol.
No, that's a great point. I've been reminded a lot this week of Thomas Jefferson. I talk about him a lot. He's one of my favorite United States historical figures, and he in his beautiful poetic rhetoric that he got very famous for as he got older and wrote letters all day, would refer to the election of 1800 when he was elected president, his first term, as the Revolution of 1800. He truly believed that the United States would have been exceedingly different under Adams, and I agree with him. I think it would have. I think the election of 1800 was a very, very important election. Just a few years later, he made the Louisiana Purchase, which I don't know that Adams would have done. I think that the party of the Federalists fell apart because of that election. And at the same time, Thomas Jefferson made some decisions while he was president that were famously tyrannical. He arrested a bunch of basically violent protesters and kept them on board ships for a long time. In violation of any law. There was no law that allowed him to do it. He just did it. And, but he did it to quell what he viewed as an uprising that could have been a civil war, essentially. And felt justified and wrote many times in his later years that he was justified. And, I don't know that I think that he should have taken some of the steps that he should have taken, but he didn't take all of them. This isn't a history lesson. But I wonder how in the future anyone will be able to justify Trump's actions this week, because for him to say, I want to walk over to that church for a photo op and then awkwardly fondle a Bible and appear in front of a church, and then the bishop to come out and say, well, he didn't, no one approached me, like that church is in my diocese. I don't want him there.
And she was run out.
Right. Well, and then she was run out. Right. And, that on top of protesters being shot in the eye, people, like 5 different people have lost their eyes this week from rubber bullets.
Well, let's not. I mean, Bill Barr said that pepper balls are not chemicals. Okay,
pepper spray.
No, he said pepper balls specifically. They didn't use pepper spray. They didn't use pepper spray. They used pepper balls, and pepper's not a chemical. All right, so I'm going to give you were just not giving a history lesson a moment ago. I'm going to not give everybody a chemistry lesson. Guess what we are swimming in every moment of every day, surrounded by and can't get away from. Yes,
God.
And by Jesus, you mean chemicals.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes, I do.
Joe Scarborough took he played the footage of Bill Barr making that claim and then went to the manufacturer of the pepper ball, and right on their website, it just says as clear as day, most effective chemical irritant on the market. So just like,
But the the issue is that the Republicans aren't going to call Barr out. That's the issue. No one on that side of the aisle has the balls to stand up to Barr and Trump. None of them. They're all fucking cowards.
but it's a fact that you can point to. It's not even up for debate.
But that's the thing. We're in this post-truth environment that they have invented where facts don't matter. It's Kellyanne Conway. We got to listen to what's in his heart. Oh, he's being sarcastic. It's like, no, he's lying. He's a liar. He and Barr lie all the time. They lie constantly to excuse their abhorrent and vile actions.
Well, and
Mic drop.
Yeah, well, Kellyanne Conway, or no, not Kellyanne Conway. Who was it? Megan, I've forgotten her name. The current press secretary for the White House, who said that.
Oh, Kayleigh McEnany.
Said that there was no use of chemical dispersants or flashbangs in clearing the riot in front of St. John's. It wasn't a riot. It wasn't even a protest. Most of them were resting, and there was gas used. So you can see it from multiple. We covered this on the show. We actually had this on the show. We played her saying that, and then we showed it getting cleared because there was like 300 people recording the thing, and it's that a press secretary can come out and say something like that. I mean, imagine if that had happened under any other administration prior to this. Imagine if that had happened to Obama, any of the Bushes, Clinton, anybody. Until I can't, the amount that we put up with, and the truth does matter, and the fact that she can't honestly, the fact that none of them can seem to tell the truth matters. But I don't know. At least I do feel like the Pentagon has been pushing back on him significantly, and we're starting to understand just how much. The New York Times came out with an article and said that the Pentagon had actually been pushing back really hard against his desire to deploy troops across the U.S., which is probably illegal if he does it without the consent of the governors, and the governors, to the best of my knowledge, universally to a T said no, thank you. So,
well, I have to disagree with you on the law there. I mean, the Anti-Insurgency Act was used to desegregate the schools in the South over the very explicit objections of the governors.
Yeah,
that's what I was curious about that.
I agree. I think though that the difference would be it was not paired with a suspension of habeas corpus and posse comitatus. Posse comitatus. See, then I did comitati too, because I was about to make fun of Trump for saying posse comitatus. We have and then I messed it up. We have another guest who hasn't even spoken yet, and I would like him to say hello and have a minute to bring his perspective for us.
Jacob.
You're muted. Oh, there you go.
You're gonna make me talk now. Hi, Jake 4D. Actually, I'm changing that to Jake 4D from Fourth Dimensional Jake.
Okay.
So when you have somebody who you allow to sarcasm, lie, you can't. You're never gonna find out. Or it's much harder to find out when they're telling the truth. And people just keep letting them lie. It just keeps getting away with it.
I also, real quick, would just like to point out how much I like the banner behind Jake. I just wanted to point that out. Just, was just saying, I really like the banner up there on your wall. I just really like it. But I agree with you. The biggest issue the Republicans have right now is that the leader of their party lies constantly, and none of them are willing to. Well, not none of them. I will say we've got Scarborough, we've got Walsh, we've got a couple of people that are prominent. George Conway, who are prominent Republicans, who are willing to call out Trump's lies. You're going to put a Clemson hat? Like, hold on, I got it.
Just try to represent
that. He took his headphones off to go get that.
Are you trying to make me come over there right now? Like, is that because
Go Tigers, baby. Go, baby.
You are
neutral corner. Neutral corner, gentlemen.
You are entitled to your wrong opinion.
Oh.
Damn. By the way, everyone,
I think the Clemson Tigers have won a couple national championships in the last couple of years, and I think they're kicking butt.
I would like to point out also that Jake was the very first patron I ever had. I would like to point that out. Thank you, Jake. like to say that publicly. No, but I think the biggest issue that the Republicans have to overcome in the upcoming election, and I don't just mean for presidential, I mean I'm talking about down the ballot, is that it is so hard to convince independents to support the Republicans right now, because if you don't fit in with the very small evangelical white Christian straight square that they have erected around themselves, you don't count as much. And the reason that I bring it up is that this moment where Trump gassed protesters for a photo op, and then he and everyone in his administration has been lying about it for days, is indicative of the central issue that they have. Somebody said in the chat a minute ago, well, all politicians lie. Brother John said that. What politicians lie? Yeah. Okay. No one's saying that politicians are the most honest people on earth. I'm not claiming that. It's when
It's a matter of scale. It's a matter of
Right.
scale.
Yeah.
It's when the attorney general says that chemicals aren't chemicals. That's the issue that we have. Okay. It's not just, a spin and narrative. I get that. Listen, I worked for a PAC and I did some of that. Okay. I
They
did
can
it.
understand perfectly well how you can spin things and massage things.
I understand spin and massage. I don't understand chemicals aren't chemicals. That's just a lie. That's not spin. Spin is, hey, you know what? We want to increase imports with China. Let's find some numbers that prove that that's going to make the stock market go up over the next 6 months. That's spin. Saying that chemicals aren't chemicals is just a lie. It's like when Rudy Giuliani said, well, truth isn't
I'm going to
truth.
presume he meant artificial and in nature, and so obviously pepper is more natural.
I'm
And
going to submit that he lied. That's what I'm going to submit.
Yeah. And, scorpion poison, being that it's natural, will not kill you, nor will snake venom, nor earthquakes or tornadoes or any of the other natural causes of lethal, toxic, violent death. Right? That's the naturalistic.
But it's not
fallacy.
chemical. That's the key factor that we're looking for.
We're
We're
not
trying
here.
to figure
Not
out how to make
chemical.
this work.
No, spin,
Okay,
instead of calling it
cyanide.
chemical, spin would be, oh, it's not a chemical irritant, it's just really spicy.
Right.
Muy picante.
Right. It's like saying, it's like
It is
saying,
for
well,
our
it's
Hispanic audience.
all right. It's like saying less than lethal.
Yeah.
We use that term during. Okay, well, less than lethal. There's a reason that less than lethal is not non-lethal, because less than lethal is like 60% lethal, and that's still lethal.
Mhm.
Like, if you get shot in the temple with a rubber bullet, you could die.
Yes.
So that's why
I
because
also have news. The
Sure.
lab that I work in has done research for the Department of Defense on crowd dispersal weapons that specifically work on olfaction. I manage a lab that studies the sense of smell. Even though, yes, so the distinction that you made, crowd dispersal chemical irritants are not considered non-lethal because in certain circumstances, should you be immunocompromised or respiratory system compromised, if that goes off near you and you get a concentrated enough dose of that, it could kill you. So that's why they're not considered non-lethal.
yeah,
But
a prisoner just died last week from being tear gassed repeatedly in his cell. That just happened.
There was a girl on the 28th, I think it was, May 28th, that was died because she had respiratory issues from tear gas.
Exactly. So it's not that it's non-lethal, depending on what the health status of the population within which you disperse it, you might have minimal risk, but that's not non-lethal. That's not how that works.
But more to the point from a legal perspective, the thing that not the only thing that's troubling, but one of the things that's really troubling about that was that the people were there lawfully and they were given no notice to disperse. So even assuming that Trump had the ability to use the Park Police or Secret Service to get the people out of the way for the purposes of the photo op, so let's go with that premise. But even then, they were given no notice to vacate, no notice to leave the area. They just started using pepper gas and tear spray and force with no advance warning. I'm like, that's not constitutionally proper. You
But
have
they're
to
changing. We're hearing different
notice.
stories about that, Kurt. We're hearing a bunch of different stories. Now, I don't say that these stories have validity, but I think it goes into the spinning machine, right? In the same interview, if I remember correctly, Bill Barr said that, oh, protesters threw things at the police. That's why it elevated to the point that it did. Also, he claims that they were asked several times over the loudspeaker that this was going to happen, but they never moved.
Well,
So
that's not what the people wrote in their complaint about it. So,
I totally agree. But I'm not bringing up these, like I said, because I believe them or because it justifies them. It's just another case in point of something happened. They're using facts that don't exist and claiming privilege, like, oh, I was there. I saw people throw things. That's what Bill Barr said. And the retort was, yeah, well, our camera people were there too, and they didn't see that. Oh, well, I was there and I saw it. Like, it's like, what leg is that to stand on?
Yeah, I try to look at it in a little bit more, like, try to look at it a little bit more, maybe objectively or biased, but I try to look at it a little bit more in terms of like what is happening, what's not happening, and some of these things are fine and some of them are not fine. Like pushing that elderly guy to the ground, not okay. Firing randomly into a crowd because a few people in that crowd are throwing balls, not okay. For example, when they arrested that CNN reporter who was standing in the middle of the street, probably okay, because that situation looked like it was probably with some sort of advance notice. But yeah, but the police have definitely done some things that are very questionable. And I believe in individual rights like the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and some of the stuff is very troubling.
And I think that's a variable worth looking at. Before I make this next point, I wanted to mention, so the video footage of the older man, the 75-year-old gentleman in Buffalo that got pushed, that was disturbing on many different levels. For me, the most disturbing part of the video, after seeing the gentleman get pushed down and seeing a pool of blood under his head, the most disturbing part was one of the policemen knelt down to try to help, and the policeman behind him pushed him forward in a never mind manner. That was more disturbing to me than the actual action. The actual action, chalk it up as a mistake. They're going to try to correct their mistake. But no, in an attempt, when one of their own tries to kneel down and help the person that, let's just give benefit of doubt, was mistakenly pushed in such a way that they banged their head, right? They were prevented from providing help. That is like think about our news sources. The news sources that we think have the most integrity are the ones that when they make mistakes, they admit it and they correct it. It's not that they're perfect. It's not that they don't make mistakes. It's that they acknowledge their mistakes and move forward in correcting it and doing something about it. That's integrity.
I prefer media that's a little bit more honest about whatever biases it has. So I'd rather watch Fox or MSNBC than CNN, because I just feel like they try to pretend they're neutral and they're not, and I don't like that. I'd rather have people be honest about their biases. So
they all say a balanced, fair newscast. All of them say that. But the most surprising thing is that I'm not surprised. Every new things that happens is just, I'm less surprised by it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this goes to one of my points, that I don't think it's so much systemic racism as I think it's just systemic, the police protecting themselves. I think it is them having military grade gear. I think that puts them into a specific mindset. I think it is the police unions. I think it's qualified immunity. I think it is people who shouldn't be police on a power trip. I think it's insufficient training, which incidentally is one of the reasons I'm a little skeptical to defund the police movement, because I think maybe, if anything, we should go the other way. Maybe it's that we don't give the police enough training. We don't make them do a year before we put them in the field. We don't have enough continuing education when it relates to things like de-escalation of crowds and how to respond to situations non-violently. And I think some of this is and we're not doing psychological screening early enough in the process to weed out people who are unfit for this service.
I think the biggest problem,
training.
Yeah,
Never
that too.
mind screening, psychological
That
training.
too. So,
Right.
so I defund the police movement seems almost counterproductive in that respect.
Now, I'd
Yeah,
like to unpack that a little bit because I've been thinking about this lately. Not that I'm a proponent of defund the police, but it's
I am.
a super fun thought experiment.
I am.
Oh, I'd love to hear. That's why I want to unpack it. I want to hear the good and bad.
Well, defund the police is a quick statement. It's like Black Lives Matter. That's a quick statement.
It's a bumper sticker.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a bumper sticker, exactly. Defund the police, in most cases, not all, doesn't literally mean defund all of the police force. It mostly refers to defund the militarization of the police. Like Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that all other lives don't matter. It means that we are not focusing. We're ignoring Black lives. We're allowing the racism in this country to forget about them and not care about them. But all lives cannot matter until Black lives also matter.
Right.
So the people who we are targeting, the people who we are leaving behind and abusing, these lives, we need to bring them up to everybody else. We need to bring everybody up, not bring everybody down.
Right.
Yeah.
And somebody said this on Twitter, and I really, really like it. If you say, I like pizza, and I come to you say, well, don't you like ice cream too? And you're like, well, yeah, but I was just talking about how I like pizza. Like I really enjoy pizza. And like, well, why don't you like ice cream? Well, I didn't say I didn't like ice cream. I just said I like pizza. And also, it's not just about defunding them. It is about defunding them. It's about lowering the funding that does all of these things. That they don't need to be involved with people that have mental health issues. They don't need to be involved with most domestic violence cases. Don't need a cop. They need a social worker, or they need a mental health professional. Police have too much authority, and police don't have enough accountability. There's not that police aren't afraid to go do things, and that's the problem. We need to make sure that police are accountable for their actions, and that they know that if they fuck up, that they will be punished to the correct amount of fucked upness that they created within the society.
Is that a legal
And on
term?
that
Can we get a
point-
ruling on that? Is correct fucked
It
up?
is.
Okay, perfect.
Fourth Amendment,
Yeah.
Article
okay.
3.
Fourth word, third paragraph.
Right.
Yeah,
On that point,
I take
Go ahead,
I take some question of Black Lives Matter because I don't know that race is a problem, and I think race might be unnecessarily divisive, and because I think there are problems, I just don't know that they're rooted in race, and I don't like this route we're going down where things are becoming so polarized, and I don't want like race to become another branch of polarization where it's coming so far apart. It's like, can't we just agree that the police are over militarized, and can't we just agree that we're asking them to do too much? Can't we just agree that they, there's not enough mental health care by mental health professionals, and there's not places for them to go for treatment and so forth and so on, without making it about race as such?
But
So
it is but here's the thing. Minorities are arrested more, they're prosecuted more heavily, and they're incarcerated longer. It doesn't matter whether or not you and I want to make it about race. It is about race, because the people who are punished more heavily and punished for longer periods of time are disproportionately more Black. I didn't do that. You didn't do that. The police probably didn't mean to do that in most cases, but that is what's happening, which is why it needs to be addressed. We can say, well, cops as a whole aren't racist. Okay, maybe or maybe not, but they are arresting more Black people. They are killing more Black people per capita, and they are incarcerating more Black people for a longer period of time.
Look at Shannon Q's interview with Nate Brody. This is statistics you can look up. This has been known for decades. When you have a white cop, they're more likely to see the Black person in the situation between a Black person and a white person as the bad guy. When you have a Black cop, you have the same thing, sometimes even more. The way Nate Brody put it, who's a former New York City police officer, is that sometimes as a Black officer, you're standing there and you're like, okay, I want to show the other guys I can put my guys in there too. And it's a huge issue.
I think Uncivil Law probably knows most of those stats, so I'm curious to hear his response, because what's your response to that? Because you're arguing. It sounds like that. Well, I'm not sure if you're suggesting that race isn't as much of an issue as other issues, or if you're arguing that it isn't an issue at all, and it's missing the point of the issue, or maybe in light of what's been said, can you give us some clarity?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the statistics that you're alluding to, but I would have questions. Like, just because the demographics are a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that the crimes would necessarily be the same demographics. So you wouldn't necessarily expect the two to be completely lined up. So that you have disproportionate outcomes doesn't necessarily imply a disproportionate process or disproportionate motivations. It might be that certain demographics, for reasons of because of economic factors, for example, are creating more crimes. And so when you look to punishment, again, is that on aggregate? And then you have to look to prior offenses and such, or is it based on the same offenses with the same thing? And you'd have to look to a whole bunch of factors. So
Well,
it's just I just try to avoid the thing being divisive when it doesn't have to be.
I
Well,
think
it-
I
that's
don't want this
a
to be a white versus black thing, because that feels like I'm being put into a tribe. I don't really want this to be like I'm being put into a tribe.
I think that's a good point, and I agree that especially the economics. I think actually probably the biggest single factor is the economics. But I think the reason, so what happens is if you have and I saw a great video that I thought did a very good rundown on this. Okay, blacks in general, so in black neighborhoods, there's less economic investment. Because there's less economic investment, and because the education for the school systems come out of property taxes, that means the school systems can't be as good. If the school systems aren't as good, they have fewer job opportunities. Further, every study that's looked into this has said that if you have a black man and a white man who have the same qualifications, same background for a job, and it's actually any minority. So a minority is going to have a harder time getting that job. When they get that job, it will have less pay. Banks don't want to invest in those communities. They don't want to give out home loans to those communities because they figure this is a bad bet. And statistically, it is a bad bet because they can't make the same kind of money. So there isn't money getting invested back in the community. And then it starts all over again. Now, is that because of the economics or is that because of the race? Well, they're enmeshed. But I agree. So I would agree that that's going to foster extra crime. That's going to cause all. But again, then the principal problem seems to me to come back down to race, if that makes any sense.
I mean, it does to me. Go ahead, Uncivil Law. What were you gonna say?
I just rather focus on the economic interests. If we can help everyone, if we're looking at like college admissions, let's help. If you look at college admissions, it's interesting because you look at the economics of college admissions and they're completely skewed to the rich, as you would expect. If you're looking at quartiles, it's all skewed in the upper quartiles. It's not as much about race as it is about money, and it's about people who are being disadvantaged not being promoted, and we can look to mechanisms for that. And that becomes the interest of how do you do that, which is a whole complicated nightmare of how do you figure out a way to elevate people who are poor, because geez, the Lord, is that complicated. Which is one of the reasons that UBI at least appeals to me superficially, because it's very easy. Now, whether or not it would work or be beneficial, but it's like, well, at least it's a very simple idea. But yeah, I think it's more about economics than race, and it just feels like race is unnecessary. When I did my bias assessment test, I came out neutral. So I'm just relying
okay.
on that.
That's great. Did Brett Byer give it to you? Anyway, no. But here's the issue.
Ouch!
You can't pull those apart because they are intertwined. Because more people in this country who are poor are minorities than people who aren't. The two are just, you can't just say, oh, well, I'm not looking at it as a race issue. I'm looking at as a class issue, as somebody just said in the chat. Okay, sure, but that's just ignoring the fact that minorities tend to be poorer. They do,
Well-
because we haven't helped their communities like we've helped other communities, and we have done everything we can to disenfranchise them since 16 and we've been really, 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 really good for the past 400 years at disenfranchising people of African descent in this country, and also people of indigenous descent, and also people of Hispanic descent. We are really, really, really good at making sure that white people are successful and people of other descent are not.
Well, and so here's the problem. It started, of course, with racism, and slavery. It started with
Right,
slavery.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, once they
Right.
were freed, once the slaves
Right.
were freed, they did not have
Slavery's not
obviously.
racist.
Yeah. Well, you could
Gotta
argue. I mean, by the way, and I've heard that argument made many times, which is that slavery isn't racist. It just so happens that they were picking, but you could enslave anyone equally, and I suppose but here's my point, which is that what it started with slavery. Obviously, they had absolutely zero opportunities. They had they were slaves. Once they were freed, they had a few opportunities, very, very small few opportunities. It was only from very progressive people who said, okay, I'm not going to see them as ex-slaves. I'm not going to see them as people who were brought over. I'm divorcing the two. But people had to do that. Now, 200, 300 years later, you've got a situation where there's been significant improvements, but because people still see, because they've had to work their way out of a ditch, you can sit there and say, well, we need to find a way to raise them up, and then once that happens, the racism will stop. I think that's completely true. I think if you hit the reset switch, if everybody started with the exact same amount of money, completely dispersed, everybody everywhere, homogenous, then in terms of economy, everything would be fine, and then racism would end. But if you could end racism, you'd end up doing the same thing. And I think the problem is now people see somebody who's black and they say, well, I am not going to invest. I'm not going to trust them. I'm not going to, because of all of these things that happen, not because they're black, but because of this economic disenfranchisement, which happens because they're black. So it can't be, or I shouldn't say, I think it's extraordinarily difficult to tease out, and I think it denies a reality to, but we should probably move on. There's been a couple of good questions. I mean, if people really want to talk about this, I suppose we can, but I just realized I'm repeating myself, so I don't know if anybody else had something.
Well, I just wanted to make a quick distinction in what Proglib was saying. I like pizza. Well, why don't you like ice cream? I think it's a little bit more immature than that. I think it's the appropriate analogy, and this is one that my wife uses, when she was complimenting our youngest daughter's hair. Our older daughter came running out of her bedroom saying, "But isn't my hair pretty too?" I think that
Right.
level of immaturity better captures the whole all lives matter kind of response
Right,
to the Black Lives Matter thing.
And some people in the chat are bringing up the 1619 whatever, the 1619 project or anything. I don't give a shit about any kind of 1619 project. I care about the year when we started bringing slaves over from Africa. So whatever narrative or spin you guys, I don't care about. That's when the international slave trade started.
So I do want to. I do want to interrupt. Or if I'm sorry if I didn't realize,
You're okay.
Okay. What I wanted to, because we have Mike here, and one of the reasons Mike came in was to talk about some of what he's been experiencing and seeing with the protests. And I want to make sure that while we have him, we do that because he made an effort to come in here. This isn't necessarily a great time for him, but he and I had spoken about this, and he wanted to come on the show to talk about it. So even though I think we're having a very valuable discussion, I'd like to continue it. So Mike, are you still there? Or was it Fifth Dimensional Mike, or who?
You mean
Do you
Jake?
mean me?
Oh, Jake. Why did I say? God, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Like, who's Mike?
yeah, Mike. I have no
I
idea.
don't even see
Jake.
anyone named
No. Okay. Yeah. Well,
The time, anytime now and later is fine. As the kids go to, once the kids are in bed, they're quiet. So I'll be here until midnight.
well, I'm not sure the stream's going to run quite that long, but
Yeah, I won't be. Okay, well, and the other thing is, I said this in chat, but if there are anybody out there who is a person of color who wants to come in and give their perspective, I always feel weird about being a straight white dude and talking about this stuff. I prefer listening. But
Yeah.
I'm the
if
whitest
you are,
person in the room. I am so white.
yes, I
100%
definitely am.
European, baby. 100%.
I think I am too. So, but
I'm a pure blood American mutt.
There you go.
yeah, I'm all over them. I have some Polish Jew in me. One of my lines is descended from the Bradfords that came over on the Mayflower. So I'm all over the place.
Well, hold on a second. Since we're talking about heritage, as an Italian American, I need to make some comments about comments that are being made in
You're
the
not
chat.
white.
Yeah, exactly. Let's leave that aside. Pineapple does not belong on pizza.
Oh, not
The
again.
end.
No,
it
not
doesn't.
again.
The
Doesn't.
end.
It doesn't. And cereal is soup. But getting back to
And tacos are sandwiches.
tacos are sandwiches. So are hot dogs. It's not hard to understand. But getting back to the topic at hand, Tony is asking us to talk about qualified immunity. And on civil law, we talked about it a little bit on the stream, but if you could go into that a little bit more.
All right, so you want to sue a police officer because they violated your rights, and you're sad. So your cause of action is 42 USC 1983. It basically says that if a person under color of law violates your rights, you can sue them, and then you can get attorney's fees under Section 1988. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Well, there's a big catch. This thing called qualified immunity, which the Supreme Court invented I think it was 1982. And basically what it says is that you cannot sue the police unless it is a violation of your constitutional rights. And here's the kicker, it was clearly established at the time, such that it would be clearly knowable to any law enforcement officer. And when we say clearly established, it doesn't have to be exact, but it has to be pretty close. For example, there was a case where a police officer performed what would be the most, they raped them. They raped a person in custody, and that was held to be qualified immunity because apparently that was not clearly established at the time. And we've seen other things like that. It happened. I cover a lot of these cases on my channel. And so basically your ability to sue the police win in a lawsuit 99% plus. It's very hard to sue the police because of qualified immunity doctrine. And so we need to figure out a way to reform this because the police get away with, they shot you with your hands up, as you were sitting down rather than you laying on the ground. Well, that's different enough in fact.
Oh my God.
That kind of crap. It's amazing the distinctions the courts will draw.
What was the one?
I wanted to quickly promote. So the New York Times, their daily podcast is called The Daily. And it was only like 4 or 5 days ago. They did one on the 5 obstacles to prosecuting policemen. And it was just riveting. It was like a 30-minute podcast. And they just very articulately laid out, okay, it's the union. And then it's the courts. And then it's the precedent set. And then it's the civilian committee, even though they are civilians. And then there's the and I'm not going to list all of them here, but if you were interested in those 5 obstacles, the New York
that sounds
Times
really interesting
podcast.
Uncivil Law. So in your legal, because I'm going to get out of here in about 10 minutes because I'm getting sleepy. But in your legal, I got to go to bed soon. But in your legal, you are the legal expert here. You are the lawyer. We are all laymen. What would it take to change that? Do we need a constitutional amendment? Or do we just need precedent from a higher court?
We either need the Supreme Court to change its mind or Congress. One of the two will be fine, because it's not a matter of constitutional law, and it's just a matter of the Supreme Court granted this immunity as it's not constitutionally required. So Congress can waive. Basically, it would be similar to Congress waiving its own sovereign immunity, which they can do by statute.
Sure.
So there've been proposals in Congress. There's a proposal right now to waive qualified immunity. I haven't read it, but I think it's a good idea. And the Supreme Court has a couple cases on its cert pool that it's looking at doing qualified immunity. So the Supreme Court might get around to it. So one of the two would be fine.
And so when you say it doesn't, I'm going to word it wrong because I'm getting tired, but it doesn't arise from a constitutional place. So what you mean by that is that there's nothing in the Constitution that the Supreme Court referenced to in order to invent qualified immunity. It's just something that they said that police should have or inherently already had.
It's something basically well, it basically didn't even start with the police. It started with, I believe it was Nixon in the first
Of course.
place, where with some of Nixon's advisors that they wanted to go after. And the idea, at least where it started, was that this is the rationale. The advisors to the president need to be able to speak candidly and need to be able to have the freedom to provide free advice. And if they realize they could be dragged into court for any advice they give, they might not be willing to give free advice. And we need the president to be having free advice. So that's kind of where it started. Was I'm pretty sure was Nixon's advisors as he was being impeached and criminally whatever. But then it went from there to basically all the executive branch from there. So the police also need this discretion to be able to act freely in their exercise their law. And if they were inhibited, then so it was basically an extension from the president's advisors is how this all came into play.
Jesus Christ.
So it started with executive privilege.
It's technically slightly different, but yeah, it's
Okay.
similar.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go. Learn something new every day.
So
We are absolutely going to do a show on this. We're going to have to.
yeah. So in your opinion, do you think it's likely?
I think there's definitely the votes for it, and there's definitely votes from the conservatives. Justice Thomas,
Yeah.
what next best? Justice Thomas has called for an end to qualified immunity.
Right. No,
and
for sure.
there's other people in the conservative wing who are very uncomfortable with it because it's not constitutionally rooted. So
Right.
one of the things, one of the conservatives, the originalists, don't like it because there's nothing in the Constitution about it. Where the heck is this coming from?
And
So
it's kind of
there's not-
funny. Oh, go ahead. I'm
Like
sorry. I thought you
conservatives
were done.
don't like it because it's invented out of nowhere.
And that's one of the things that people like me got on Scalia for, was that he was such a constitutionalist. He was such, it's got to be in the text. But here we're like, oh no, Scalia's right. Oh yeah, for sure, it's not in the text.
Well, so now,
Um,
but they can't just overturn it. There has to be a case that comes before them to challenge it. Is there anybody
That's
who's
true, but they have a couple cases in their cert pool right now
Oh,
where they
okay.
were looking at. So there's like 5 cases in their pool that they were looking at potential candidates to do something with qualified immunity. So they might do something on qualified immunity. I don't know if they. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to address something, and this will be the last thing that I address. This is a little bit of a different topic, but I want to get in Civil Law's opinion on this real quick. Vodka Not just said, I think constitutional amendment is needed. Term limits on senators and congressmen. And I want to know real quick on civil law, how do you feel about term limits on senators and congressmen?
I don't think it does what people would hope it does, is my
I
view
agree.
on it. I think that it creates even more power in ongoing institutional players because people don't know what's going on. I think it winds up giving even more power to lobby groups and stuff because no one has enough time to become
I agree.
overcome those forces.
Right. And
And
the reason that they wanted term limits on senators and congressmen was that they felt that, and when I say they, I mean the framers, they felt that if senators and congressmen were only inhibited by making sure that their constituents were taken care of, then they would only take care of their constituents. And they wouldn't really care about all of these other things, because if you only give them 8 years to be in office, then they have to do everything that they need to do for their constituents within 8 years. But if they might be in office for 20 years, the wheels of the law will move slowly. And the framers felt that a slow moving legislative body was less likely to create radical reforms and get to a place of tyranny. So I agree with you. I do not think that senators and congressmen should have term limits.
All right. Well, what I'd like to do, I do want to start wrapping this up. I think ProLib's getting tired. I'm getting tired. Uncivil Law has been with us for a while now, but once again, so I do Fourth Dimensional Jake. I'm going to get it right. I don't know why I keep going for Mike in my head. So you had talked a little bit about what you saw of the protests. Was that something? Do you want to? We can have you back. I think we're going to do this again next week. We're going to do this for a little while, so long as things are a little intense out there. Did you want to talk about that a bit now, or did you want to? I know it's these evenings are kind of tough for you.
Yeah, it's anything after usually about 8 p.m. Pacific time, which I missed the show because I guess you're Eastern time.
Yeah. Yeah.
YouTube told me it was starting at 7 instead of 6. So, yeah, I mean,
Well, you can have him back on because there's a lot of really interesting Supreme Court opinions coming up. There's one dealing with
Yeah.
the Electoral College and whether or not faithless electors can be punished. That's going to be really interesting. One dealing with LGBT rights in the workplace. Super interesting. Tax records from Trump still pending. Whether or not half of Oklahoma is in Oklahoma or not. All kinds of good stuff coming up.
And Mr. Mowdy, I wanted to say, Mr. Mowdy and I have talked privately about doing something soon. We need to do that. You and I need to have a
I
thing.
agree. Without a doubt. Now is the time.
Yes.
I've been away from the intertubes, and I am not making a grand appearance, but I am saying that, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, like, I'm anxious as fuck, and one of my ways of dealing with it is talking to people and listening and just wrapping my head around it. And the best way for me to wrap my head around it is to talk to people. So,
well, I'm going to DM you as soon as we're done here, and we're going to set something up. So
let's do this.
Yes.
Yeah, the one thing I did want to know is with that video of George Floyd, the last few minutes of his life, the people there who were around the police, the people filming, the people on the sidewalk, what could they, like, what would happen if they tried to stop the police from kneeling on them? What is there is there a legal precedent for civilians to step in and stop the police from unlawful actions?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. Obviously, that you would imagine the police are going to try to stop you for obstruction and arrest you and all the rest of it. I think as a strict matter of law, I think you would be okay. But the problem is like actually getting there, and you basically have to be right in fact. So that's a problem. So like after the fact, yeah, you probably could have done it, but like at the time, like that's really challenging.
Yeah, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you, and you're going to get arrested and charged.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to happen.
The George Floyd, I know we don't really have time to talk about it right now because the legal issues are really interesting and really complicated. There's some serious doubt in my mind as to whether or not he can be convicted of third-degree murder for some very technical reasons. There's some doubts in my mind he can be convicted of second-degree murder for some very technical reasons. The cop, that is, of course.
Right.
So
I think we need to have you back and do a whole show on Floyd and Arbery.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Arbery one is great because some of the people in my chat will not listen to me, no matter how much.
Oh, shocking!
No matter how much they say, no, it was bad, and that is very illegal, and they're going to jail forever. They don't want me to say that,
yeah,
and I've
done
extensive legal analysis trying to prove it to them that what they did was wrong, and they shot a person without cause, and they're going to go to jail.
God, what do they watch Fox News all the time or something?
I don't know.
Anyway, I'm just teasing. I'm right though. I'll shut up.
All right. You know, I think this is. I think we have a friend. I think we found a friend. We'd like to have you back. We'll have you back for a show with a bit of a broader scope, I think, and just hang out and talk about some of the stuff because I think we're really enjoying picking your brain. So I do think I want to thank Christopher Mowdy for showing up. Forth to mention Jake, and also thank you, of course, to Uncivil Law. We've been dropping a link to his channel. Please do subscribe to him, and the link will also be in the description. I wish we had more time. I think we're all tired. It's about 11:30 here, and I've got a very long or early morning tomorrow, and so we will definitely have Uncivil Law back. I think this was a genuine pleasure. Thank you all for coming. And unless I'm missing anything, I think we'll see you guys tomorrow for epistemology with Osmandius, and we will see you also with for our Patreon hangout tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So I hope you guys will join us. Thank you all again, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.